I used to be ashamed of my past and unsure if I'd make it to where I was going, but I knew one thing was for certain. We don't end up where we're going on accident. I've also learned that we can't erase the past or hide from it, but we can learn from it and pass it on to others. So who am I? I'm the definition of a bootstrap girl, someone who's made the hard choices to pick themselves back up and make something of themselves. And I'm not the only one. My name is Denisha. I'm a mom, a wife, a professor, advocate, queen of my own path, who's overcome abuse, foster care, homelessness, and raising 5 siblings on my own at the age of 24. And eventually I got a PhD. But something that I learned is that I don't know everything. So here on my show, we're going to be bringing in people who know the things that we don't know. Let's get in and learn on the Dr. Denisha Keating Show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Denisha Keating Show. I was debating if I would use my late night radio station voice on, looking at smooth jazz, or if I was going to talk normally, but I realized my voice is just tired. This last week has been a lot in California. We've had multiple fires that were either started or just kind of like our wildfire season. Literally, we call it a wildfire season. It's a season for us. It's hot, really hot fire, winter-ish for a week, some rain, and then back to hot. That's just California for you. But it got me to thinking about a particular situation that happened 4 years ago. And it makes sense because of everything that's literally tied into what I'm going to talk about, like why it kind of spurred that, like, oh my gosh, wow. So 4 years ago, we had moved from the city that we had been living into another like city that was like 45 minutes to an hour away to be closer to where I was working, and Mark was working in a different place. And so this place that we bought was in the middle for both of us. So it would make my commute significantly less. I was commuting like 2.5 hours one way without traffic before we moved. And then when we moved, it was still like 45 minutes to an hour away, which was great. Like it felt so much better, so different. But 2 days after we got the keys to this house, I lost my job. And I just remember all of the feelings. Like it's around that time 4 years ago where I was sitting in August and September being like, I'm almost out of unemployment and I have no job offers. And we're in the middle of the pandemic lockdowns. And there's everyone sending emails saying like, hey, there's no jobs. Like, hey, we're postponing the job that we promoted. Thank you for your application or interview. But right now we're on a massive hold on jobs. And I just panicked and I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We just bought this house. That house is very close to where the evacuations have been happening. And I kind of sat back and I was like, oh my God, because we just moved this summer to a new location that's super close to family. Like we're like 10 minutes from most of our family and 20 minutes from like my side and like 25 minutes from church. Like it's a perfect location for us. And I'm just sitting here and like, even though we see all the fire in different areas, we see the smoke coming from all the sides in California. I'm like sad because it's like, oh no, the new owners have that house out there. Like I hope they're okay, but also super grateful that we're not in that situation because of the fact that I have moved so many freaking times. Like from the age of 18 to 24, I moved over 33 different times. Like I never had a place to live that was consistent because I had to move so much. And so I could only imagine like the fear I would have had if we had stayed where we were at and having to be like, hey, you need to get out now. Like you're evacuating. I would be like, I don't want to leave my house. Like I don't want to have to do this. Like that would have just been devastating, I feel like, to have to go through. And I'm kind of like, But it brings up this concept of like fear of losing where we live. And I know a few people right now that I follow on like social media or in personal life, like I'm their friend, that they're going through the loss of a house. And it is so hard to watch because there's nothing I can do to help outside of be a listening ear and say like, hey, no, you have every right to feel this, where it's like a loss of you because you don't have a place called home. And it makes me very sad because then it for me personally, like there was a lot of different things that I started to feel because I didn't have a place to call home. Like I was talking to someone that's going to be a guest on the podcast, and I'm like, I noticed, and I got into this understanding that like my friends, like I felt like my friends were family, and they were like, hey, you're my best friend, but like they had their own family, and I was always looking for connection. So then what I started to do was, if I couldn't connect with people, I started to connect to places, but then I got a really unhealthy attachment to nothing. but I was able to like cut emotions off. Like you made me mad, I was able to be like, okay, we're done. We're not like boom, we're out. So the fear that it turns into is the fear to get close to people, the fear to get attached to a home, the fear to get attached to a car, a fear to get attached to things that are ours, or to get attached to someone we love and care for. And it's like the fear can look many different ways, but what is at the root is like, I'm afraid I'm going to lose this. And so sometimes what happens is we get into destructive behavior. I know for me, the way that looked was I would binge eat a lot of food, and then I would like crash course into a diet. I would get really, in this, I'm calling myself out, I would get really obsessed with working. And I would like cut everybody off because I was so scared to put myself out there, that being connected to people scared the living bejeebies out of me. I don't even know if that's a term, but it is now. I'm a doctor. I can do that. Imagine. That'd be so cool if I could just like make up phrases and terms and be like, hashtag I'm a doctor, but not that kind of doctor. That could be, anyway, that's going to be a hashtag. But there was this deep rooted fear that again, like I started binge eating. I started cutting relationships off like super early. I like first sign of issue or conflict, really, it would be like, oh, that person like raised their voice at me. Like, oh, we're done. We're never going to talk again. But conflict scared me so much that then what I started to do is I internalized like, I have to be perfect. And this internalized so much of like wanting identity and wanting connection, that I would start to be like, okay, I have to put this persona out that like people understand I'm a good person, I'm a safe person. I have to clear my name every single time I walk out the door. I have to make sure that people know I am who I say I am. And what that didn't allow for was that it didn't allow for healthy conflict to happen in my life. I would horribly run. I would sabotage relationships. I would end things before people had a chance to even enter the conversation. And that could be friends, bosses. Usually it looked like, and a friend can attest to this, where he's just like, you make the decision before consulting people. And I'm like, well, most of the decisions are on me. He's like, yeah, but like, you don't have to do this on your own. And I'd be like, okay, well, you said like this project's ending. So now I'm just going to dissolve the project as well as these other three, but then I'm also going to like dissolve the friendship, and I'm going to dissolve like being even a part of this. And then I would just like leave. And there is a difference too, where it's like, okay, you're not getting hours at work and stuff like that. That's normal. That's stuff that you just like, okay, I gotta go. I gotta get a job that's actually going to pay me. But it wasn't healthy because in order to protect myself, I was avoiding conflict. And then what I made it look like was that I was working, I was in school, but like, I'm not even kidding. I'm just going to be flat out honest. I didn't have a lot of friends, and still don't have a lot of deep friendships that lasted the last 15 years. So I've had like the longest, like I've known people for 15 years, but it's like the deep rooted, like that's a friend that is in every season of my life, I didn't have. And so like I would pull back because I would get so scared of being seen, because one, I would always feel like, okay, what's the point of being known? But that was rooted in like the only thing that I could attach to was where I lived or where I worked or like who I was with. But it would be very unstable because I was consistently living in fear that I was going to lose something. And that just changed over time from like houses. So that once housing got stable, it was like relationships. And once relationships got stable, it was finances. Once finances got stable, it was like, okay, where do I panic now? And I've been talking to my therapist and my husband about it, where I'm like, I'm finally feeling this last year of going to counseling full time. Let me backtrack. When I used to go to counseling, I'd go for like 3 to 6 months and like miss appointments and stuff like that, because it's not that I didn't take it seriously, is that I didn't want to have to go dig into certain things. And then I would get a bad counselor and make that a reason of why I couldn't go back. But then, like, this is the longest I've been in counseling, almost 10 months. I started in December and I've gone pretty regularly. There's only a couple times that I've missed. And I have felt the growth in the last year of just being able to process something with somebody and be like, hey, I'm not crazy for what I feel. And the biggest message that I've heard over and over and over again is just, Denisha, you desire connections and authenticity from people. And the reason they missed it wasn't because they were a bad friend or a bad person. It's because they're in a different season right now. And that at first, like, that would hurt sometimes because I'm like, be in the same season as me. But me in December was like, y'all are jaded. Peace out. Like, screw you all. I was so done and hurt. Some of it was myself causing it to myself, but then there was a lot of situations that were happening to where I had been really hurt over the last decades by people, and I just didn't know who I could really trust. And I couldn't even here. Let me go deeper here, because I'm just gonna be honest. It wasn't just all like who I could trust. It was I also couldn't even trust myself with my own belief of like what happened in my life. And it wasn't until, and this is not going to happen for everybody, because of the level of abuse that I went through. I did have CPS involved. There was notes, there were records. I didn't get access to all of it. Most of it is redacted, but enough of what I saw proved I didn't make up what I remembered. All the way down to 2. Like, I have memories from 2 years old. And I'm like so grateful for me to have that, like, hey girl, you didn't make it up. Like, those things happened to you. Those things were real. And I've been able to sit with that since May of like, you're not crazy. But I'm like understanding that there are so many people out there that don't have that reassurance of like what you went through was real. So when you can't trust people and then you can't trust your own memory, you go a little like rogue. You get a little jaded. It's harder to let things go. It's harder to trust people and know, like, do you have my best interest in mind? And there's still emotions that I'm going to have and thoughts I'm going to have, but I've recognized in the last 10 months, my panic has gone down. My panic was so bad. My fear of like, it turned into this fear of like, if I pass out, and I've been had for like the last year and a half, I've had this really unhealthy fear of like, I'm going to pass out. And it has caused so much havoc in my life to where it's like, I couldn't go. I love Disney. If you know me, I love Disneyland. But I couldn't even go to Disneyland and ride the Little Mermaid. Now, let me tell you, the Little Mermaid is just a shell. Like, it's a chair that you sit in like this, and it just goes, and that's it. Like, it doesn't do anything else. There's one moment where it goes back, and that's it. And I couldn't go on there without panicking. And I recognized recently, like, we ended up going to Disneyland in like early September or something like that, or late August, something like that. And we went on a bunch of rides, and there was some moments where I would be like, oh, I'm excited, or oh, I'm nervous, but it wasn't the full-blown panic attack that I was having before, where before I was sitting there, like, I would get in the line and like internally I'm like feeling like I'm that person, like throwing things, kicking things, pushing people out of the way, and just screaming bloody murder. Like, that was what was happening inside. And then now it was like a little bit of nervousness. And I've recognized that a lot of what my body has been feeling is like, I can't trust the world. I can't trust myself. And when you live in that for a very, very long time, you start to not be able to actually think through situations. Everything I was experiencing really was personal to me. Conflict was very personal. I would always be like, oh, are you trying to take me out completely? Like, unhealthy. Like I work with a lot of people that I get to coach, and it was like if something bad happened, like I missed an email or I had to ask them for an extension, I would immediately be like, oh my God, this is going to destroy my entire business and everything I've ever worked for. And then I would spiral. And like I was telling my therapist this week, I was like, I'm relieved, really relieved, because I would obsess over a hard situation for 3 to 4 weeks before, minimum, to the point where it was like, did I do this? Did I do that? Okay, that's what happened. Okay, did I do this? Did I do that? That's what happened. Okay, this and this and this. Okay, that is what happened. Oh, I'm going to obsess over these emails and the responses, and I should have responded like this for 3 to 4 weeks minimum. And recently when conflicts happen, it's like 20, 30 minutes where I'm like, oh, that's annoying. I can't believe that happened. Or, oh my gosh, a moment of like, oh my gosh, my email didn't go through. And I sent that email off. And everyone's been so gracious. And I'm like, I didn't spiral and be like, oh my God, everything's over. And I told her, I was like, I was so exhausted before. Like, I literally would come into most of my appointments and be like, she's like, how are you? And I'm like, I'm exhausted. I'm tired. And it's not just physical, it's emotional and mental. Like I can't sleep through the night. I can't like think clearly. I'm always thinking about like, how do I stay 6 steps ahead? And so I'm just always tired. And this is all rooted in fear. So when, 4 years ago when I lost my job, it was like, okay, 2 days after getting my keys to our house, being in the kitchen, being like, oh my God, we have all of these projects to do that we can't do now. I just lost my job. There's nothing out there. What the heck am I doing? And this was my dream job. Like everything I ever wanted to do. And then I was in the middle. I was actually toward the end of my doctoral program, meaning that I was entering into the last stage of the dissertation stage to write my 5 chapters, do my own research. And I looked at my chair and my husband, and I was like, I don't know if I should continue. And both of them are like, girl, you are too far in to stop now. But also too, like this can open up doors for you. And I'm so grateful that they spoke into that. But it was like, what's the point of moving on? And I felt that again in December of like, what's the point? If this is where my life is going to be rooted in fear, and I'm going to have to feel like this the rest of my life, like what's the point of like even living? Like why not just sit at home and be on the couch all the time? Like why try to go out and have fun if I can't walk into onto the Little Mermaid without panicking? Like why would I even have a Disney pass? Like why as well just stay home? And like if medication's not working, because it wasn't working, it was just like all of these things. And I was just like, there's no point in going outside. Like it just doesn't make sense. And when fear is ruling our lives, it looks and manifests differently. I said a keyword. A lot of people are like, what? Don't say that word. But it does. Fear can be this thing that when we're afraid, sometimes it's not what we are initially thinking that we're afraid of. Like my thing the last year and a half, I was like, I don't know why I have this fear of passing out. It wasn't that I actually had a fear of passing out. I've never passed out except for one time, almost one time, half time. Like, anyway, half of it, like I've only ever had one half of that experience. But deeper than that was, I'm vulnerable to the people around me if I pass out. And then when I was with Harper, if I was by myself at Disneyland, it was like, and then I have to hope that someone would see me, take care of her, not hurt her or me, and like take care of us. I have to be vulnerable it's a very intimate thing. If you pass out, you have to trust the people around you. And I was like, I don't trust people and I don't trust myself. But then that's when I was able to get to the root of it was, I'm afraid that I don't have anybody. I'm afraid that I don't belong. I'm afraid that there's no connection. I'm afraid that I don't have anybody or anything, because that's what I've already experienced. So it was like, it's just like, well, what's the point of all of this? Is that fear can destroy us. And so when you start to think of like, well, this is what my fear is, like start to dig a little deeper to see if there's more going on than just that. And this could take weeks or months, sometimes a year, to be like, oh, my fear was rooted in me being unsure of other people, not trusting other people, and not even trusting my own thoughts and memory. And when you're like, I don't know if that actually happened, or it's like, I think it did, but I'm not sure, that can be really, really difficult. But then there's that deep rooted, like, I don't belong here. Like, I don't have anybody to look at me and say, hey, you didn't remember that wrong. You are cared for, you are seen, you are known, and you are loved. So when we're looking at what we're going through, maybe you're experiencing it from like you're watching somebody else go through that. You can, and you probably are reiterating over and over again, like, I love you, I see you, I know you. You are not a burden. You're not something that I want out of my life. Like, I want you here. There has to be some work done in that person to recognize what they're afraid of that's rooted and what's causing that to manifest into different behaviors. So if you're also the person who's going through it, where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid, or like I'm struggling, or this or that, again, there's the initial fear that's at the top, but there's a root fear that's down below that we have to dig through. And I think for me, like, the fear again of losing my home is like, this is my place. And the fear of losing communities, like, these are my people. Like, I don't want to be by myself, because I've been there. I've been there where it's like, I'm by myself, I have nobody, and it's a lonely place to be. But when you can find some rest for your soul and your mind, is you start to see that those things that are hurting you, they're not the actual thing. There might be some things where it's like, hey, that person needs to go. They cannot be here. But there might be some other things where we're taking it more offensively, but it's not actually that thing. That's the thing that we're choosing to be upset about, or it's very similar feeling to what we feel, but we just haven't dug deeper into that experience or that understanding or that emotion or what that fear looks like. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and leave them. But thanks for coming to the TED Talk for today. Have a great day. Bye.